Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I'm David Goldstein, president of Mekko Graphics, and for the next half hour, we'll walk you through some tips and tricks around building better Marimekko charts. Just before we get started, a couple of small things. One is, like I said, this webinar is focused around Marimekkos, and it's also not an advanced webinar, but not something for beginners. If you're just, I'm assuming that you know how to make a basic Marimekko chart, you've made a few charts, or maybe a bunch of charts, and you're trying to figure out how to do a better job, how to make them look a little better, how to make them faster, and those are the kinds of things that we're gonna focus on. Really, sort of tips and tricks for the current user of Marimekko charts. If you are new to Mekko Graphics, then I would recommend the introductory webinar, which is available on our website. It's about 90 minutes long. We run it every other month, and it'll give you a good introduction to the software and how it works. And if you want something shorter to get you started with Marimekkos, we have also in our video series, we have how to build a Marimekko chart. It's a 5-minute sort of introduction to Marimekkos. So a couple other things. We will send this presentation to everyone who attends and everyone who signed up and wasn't able to attend. And we are recording the webinar, and we will put the recording up on the website. We'll send you a link to the recording and a link to the presentation. And finally, a couple of my colleagues are available during the webinar to answer any questions you have. And I will stick around for a few minutes at the end of the webinar, and will be also available to answer questions. Great. So let's get going. Let's dive in. I'm going to show you some things. I've got a bunch of Marimekko charts. I make a lot of Marimekko charts, so I'm going to share with you some of the ones that I made and some of the tips and tricks that I used in making them. First thing I wanted to show you on this chart here is how to work with a couple of features in Mekko Graphics to make your Marimekko a little more impactful, and also to make it a little easier to make your chart. So this is a pretty simple chart. It's just looking at the home entertainment spending split between digital spending on digital and spending on physical, and also grouped into 3 different kinds of spending: spending on subscriptions, rentals, and purchases. So what I wanted to do in the Marimekko was lay out digital versus physical, and then use the legend to show the colors and bring in color as a third dimension. So let me show you a couple of things. First, before I show you how I dealt with the colors, I want to show you that the data that I used to create this Marimekko chart, which you can see here, is in thousands. So it's digital is 2,000, which is, so it's basically $2 million, but the data are rounded to the nearest. It's $2 billion shown in millions. So that's why it's 20009, 6230, etc. So what I wanted to do was, rather than show it in millions as it came in from Excel, I want to show it in billions and use a B as a suffix. So to do that, Mekko Graphics has a feature we call data scaling. Turns out that that when I demo this to many of our customers, they don't realize it's there, but it is there. We introduced it probably 1 or 2 versions ago. It is in the Format Chart ribbon, which you see here, which you can get to by clicking in the Format section of the Mekko Graphics ribbon on the Chart button. And it is in the Values tab of Format Chart, and it's about 3/4 of the way down here. You can see this feature we call data scaling. So here I have data scaling set to 3, which basically is going to take the numbers in my chart data, So it's going to take 2,000 and divide by 10 to the third power. And instead of showing up as 2010, it will show up as 2.0. And you can see if I remove the scaling, it will go back to 2000. So adding the scaling basically, again, divides by 10 to the third, and it allows you to bring your data in the format that it came in Excel, or it came from the web, or it came from your database. Keep it in that format in the Mekko Graphics data editor, but display it in another format. So came in millions, displaying in billions using data scale. So that's one I think, nice tip and trick. Second thing I wanted to show you on this chart is that I added a data row, and it's right down here. I often use a data row if I want to show, say, growth in each of these channels, digital versus physical. And you can see I added it here, 15% growth in digital and 12% decline in physical. And the data row, basically you can add a data row to most, if not all, Mekko Graphics charts, and you can do that in the bars and series function. If you click on bars and series, you go to series, and you say show it, don't show it on the chart, show it as a data row at the bottom of the chart. And you can format that data row as a % if you want, which is what I did here. So that's a second tip. And the third is all I did was take my chart and apply colors to the blue color to my 2 series that were subscription, my orange color to the 3 series that were rental, and my green color to the 2 series that were purchase. And I did that just by right-clicking and setting the series colors on the right click, and you can multi-select and do that as well. Select multiple series, right-click, and set the colors right here. And then what I did was I used my legend. I added a legend to the chart, and then I used the Format Legend button here to just show 3 legend items instead of the 7 that would be displayed by default. And then all I did was I just went into each legend item, double-clicked, and edited them so they have the right captions: blue for subscription, orange for rental, and green for purchase. So any label in Mekko Graphics, you can double-click and edit in any way that you want. And if you don't like it, you can always undo what you just did. So those are the tips from this chart. Basically, adding the legend to add color, using data scaling to reduce to change the number format and simplify the display. So let me move on to the next tip and trick. I'm going to show in this chart here one of the most common things we do in a Mekko Graphics chart is sort. The convention in a Mekko Graphics chart is sorting data so that the widest bar is on the left. So USA has the most billionaire sports team owners, and that the biggest segment is on the bottom of each bar. So each bar is sorted internally to go from bottom to top, from biggest to smallest. And you can do the sorting in a very straightforward way. It is, again, in the Format section of the ribbon on the Chart button. The third tab is the Sort tab. And you just need to come here and sort your series, biggest on bottom. Sort your bars, widest on left. The default would be typically first on left and first on bottom, which would give you a chart that kind of look like this, and is basically in the order that the data are entered in the spreadsheet. So you can see Europe is the first bar, and it goes from soccer to Cricut. But if I want to change the sort, I just go in again to Format Chart, Sort, biggest on bottom, widest on left. There. So very simple sorting. Let me show you a couple of variants on sorting that our customers often ask for. And I will show it to you in this chart. A lot of times our customers will ask to, I want all the data sorted except I want my company or my client company to appear on the bottom. So you can see in this chart, FedEx is on the bottom and all of the other bars are sorted except for the other bar, which is the other series, which is on the top. So you can, in Mekko Graphics, change the sort order or exclude items from the sort order. So if we look at this chart, we can see in Format Chart that it is sorted widest on left, biggest on bottom. But we overrode a couple of those sorting options in the Format section. In the Bars and Series button, we went to Series, and you see the Series FedEx here. We have this column called Sort Order, and we said exclude FedEx from the sort and have it always appear on the bottom. By default, FedEx would be sorted, and it would be, you can see in the first, the second in Asia Pacific, the first in Americas, and the fourth from the bottom in Europe. But if I say on the bottom, it's always going to appear on the bottom and everything else will be sorted. And here I have an other series, which has all of the smaller players. And I also want to exclude that from the sort. If I didn't exclude that from the sort, other would be mixed in each bar in a different place. So if I exclude it from the sort and say always on the top. If you have, you can also exclude bars from the sort. I didn't do this in this example, but again, in Format, Bars, and Series, if you go to the Bars tab, you can also exclude from the sort and say always on left or always on the right. Great. So I think I'm done with most of sorting. The one other sorting related feature that I wanted to show you was something that we call the Other series. And this is something that's been in Mekko Graphics really since the beginning, but we don't find that a lot of our customers are aware of it or use it. The general notion is that in your data sheet, sometimes you'll have small competitors in this market map grouped into other. So you see in each of my columns, in vitro, cardiology, et cetera, I already have other here. But sometimes the other that comes from your initial analysis isn't exactly right, and you might want to add other things. You might want to add some other competitors to that other series. Hopefully that was clear. And you can do that in Mekko Graphics in the Bars and Series. In the Series options, you can see one of the options is Other Series. So here you can either use a series that you already have in your data sheet or create something totally new. Sometimes all your data is, you have data on each competitor, but you want to group the smaller ones into other, and you just click on this button here and you can create a new series and give it a name that you want. Or you can just take the series that already exists and then you can add things to it. So let me see. Just based on my data, this is what the chart would look like. So I still have other on top, but I still have a lot of very small competitors. And I can take a look at my data and say, well, maybe anything with less than 2 billion in revenue, maybe I want to group that also into other. So here we've got this button called Update Other Series, and I can say any segments with values less than 2, let's update and include them in other. And you see a lot of them went away. Maybe 2 was too small because I still have a bunch of things over here, and I can say, well, maybe let's change it to maybe 2.5. And that's even a little better. And if I want to go further, I can change it to 3. And now my chart is even more compact with an even bigger other series. If that was too much, anytime you change it, it'll just update the chart. You can also go individually and select items to include in other. So here, if I wanted, say, Becton-Dixon in vitro included in other, I can just go to this little dialog here, and click, and Becton-Dixon automatically adds to other. So other is a great way to shrink your data, to make your chart clearer, a little more concise. So I would recommend using it, playing with it. I think it works pretty well. The alternative to using an other series is taking the smaller segments in your chart and displaying them with these annotated labels. So this sometimes your segments near the top, because your data are sorted, get pretty small, but you want them there. You want to know which states have medical only use of marijuana legal. You want to show all those 8 states, and you want to show the 6 states that are totally legal, that are smaller, and the 2 with recreation that are totally illegal, that are smaller, and the 2 with recreational use that are smaller as well. So to do that, let me show you how to do that. It takes a little effort, but it's not, I would say, horrible. Let me go back to the Label Manager tab and restore all my labels. So that'll put them all back in their segments. So here I can just highlight the labels. I tend to use the little lasso here to highlight the labels. And then I can right click and say annotate. And that'll make those labels annotated. Here I can say, let's take, I don't know, let's see if I can get the first 4 here. Right click, annotate. I got 5. I can restore that one. Now I've got 4. I can highlight these and use my arrow keys and move them to the right. Almost done. I can get the next batch this way. Right click, annotate, and they'll show up there on the left. So this annotation and the right click and moving things around is not a bad way to take your small labels and display them in a more readable way in the chart. Sometimes if you're doing this, you might want to adjust your chart margins. So you can always do this show hide margins here and take your top margin and drag it down to give yourself enough space at the top of the chart to show your annotated labels. So I find that really useful if you've got, like I said, a really complicated chart and you want to show those labels. You want to show all your labels, and you don't want to use the other series. A couple of other things to do with the chart to make it look better. We added maybe a year or so ago some different coloring options for our charts, and those are in Format Chart. In the General tab, you've got right here coloring mode, And if you want each bar in your chart to be a different color, to sort of highlight the importance of the bars, you can just say color by bars here. You can also do color by series before sort, which is the default, or color by series after sort, which sort of applies the chart colors after the data in your chart are sorted. I would tend to play around with these and see if you find, some of our customers find color by series after sort as a good default for their Marimekko charts. Just one or two other things I wanted to show you before we wrap up, and maybe open it up for some questions. One is using data rows in your chart. Sometimes there's other information that you might find important to show in your chart, and that information is related to each bar in the chart. So here I have a chart of Michelin 3-star restaurants, and I wanted to show, and it's organized by country. So you can see which countries have the most Michelin 3-star restaurants. But I also thought it would be interesting to see which are the most, which cities have the most restaurants. This Japan thing blew me away. I didn't realize there were so many 3-star restaurants in Japan. And I wanted to know, are they all in Tokyo, or are they spread out among the different cities in Japan? So I have 2 data rows in my chart, 3 data rows in my chart, and I will show them to you right here in my data sheet. So cities with most 3-star restaurants, I have Paris, Tokyo, and New York in my first row, and then London, Kyoto, and San Francisco in my second row, and just Hong Kong in my third row, so that I've got 2 rows under Europe, 3 under Asia, and 2 under USA. And then all I did was you need a label for each data row, otherwise we can't show it in the chart. So this has got cities with most 3 stars, which shows up here. Over here, there's just a cell with a blank space in it, and the same here. That way I can have 3 data rows. And then to tell Mekko Graphics that these are data rows, you can do that from bars and series like I showed you before, or also you can just right click here and say show series as data row. It's a little faster way to get to the data rows. Yeah, so I wanted to show you that. And then last couple of charts to show you. One is just a little more complex chart. So here I've got the data row at the bottom, and I'm using the data row to show the percent of the total market for each of these regions. So this is projected demand for new airplanes from 2015 to 2035, and you can see that Asia's 40% of them are going to be in Asia, and a little less than 20 in Europe, and then down from there. So I added that as a data row, and then I added 2 data columns because I wanted to show the growth, the size, and the percentage of each of the types of jets. So large wide bodies is a $220 billion market, but it's only 4% of the total. Whereas the biggest are the single aisle planes, followed by the small and medium wide bodies. To do this, I've just got, all I need to do is get the data into my data sheet. You can see in the data sheet here that I've got percent of total here, which corresponds to the data row at the bottom. And then I've got total and percent of total here corresponding to the data columns. You'll notice that the data for this chart are transposed so that we're treating the rows as bars and the columns as series. And to do that, we just use this button here we call switch bars and series. So if your data is coming in in a format that you don't want, and you want you don't want to transpose the data in the data sheet, you can use this switch bars and series button to basically tell Mekko Graphics to treat the columns as series and the rows as bars, which is what we did here. And then I just made these two data columns by the right click, show bar as data column, and this one a data row, show series as data row. And then I included totals for the two data columns. And you can do that in bars and series when you designate something as a data column. You can say here, auto total, and that'll put the total here at the bottom. It's a handy little feature. And then there was just a little bit of data alignment that I had to do to get my legend and my data columns to line up nicely. But that's really just a question of highlighting and using your arrow keys to move things around, and your alignment buttons, which are also a nice little Mekko Graphics feature. If you don't know about it, you can always right click and say left align or right align all of these labels. So all those features are center align all the labels. All those features are in Mekko Graphics, and they can help make the charts look a little nicer. And then last chart I wanted to show you was just was really two charts. Sometimes I've got a simple Marimekko chart, like the global market for iPhone and iPad apps, broken down by operating system and by region. And I wanted to show that here, but I also wanted to show the totals worldwide. So I have two charts on this slide. I've got the Marimekko chart on the left, and then just a simple 100% stacked bar chart on the right with a Kaggle column. So really, it's just, if you just double click, you'll see that this is just the Marimekko. And I adjusted my margin so that the two charts sit nicely next to each other. That's just with this data here and the data and the Kaggle row at the bottom. And this chart here is just a 100% stacked bar chart with just the three. I just used the same spreadsheet, but just showed this bar rather than these bars in that chart. So you can often do this. I often do this just by doing like a copy paste. So I'll make the Marimekko, I'll copy it, I'll paste it into the spreadsheet, into the slide as a second chart. Then I will change the chart type from Marimekko to 100% stacked bar, show the columns that I want to show, and then just lay it out here. And if you ever want to make sure that your data rows, that your x-axis is aligned across the chart, you can always right-click on any of the margins and get the margin position. So this margin is set to 81, and then you can go to this chart, right-click on that margin and make sure that's also 81. So if the chart has the same bottom, basically if the chart is the same size, which you get from copy-paste, and you can set the margins to the same size, and then the margins will align in your slide. So those are my tips and tricks. I have just the last slide in the chart in the deck that's got some resources for you to look at if you want to see more about Marimekko charts. We have a page on our chart called The Power of Mekko Charts, which is a really good introduction to Marimekko charts. We've got a bunch of Marimekko charts in our chart gallery, and those are totally downloadable. Many of these charts are in that gallery, and many charts like it. We've got our training webinars, which I described to you at the beginning of this webinar, and we've got short videos, how to make a Marimekko chart, how to make a bar Mekko chart, how to add an axis break, or how to add a data row. And then we also do the blogs. My favorite, obviously, is the chart of the week. A lot of these charts came from the chart of the week blog, which is just going to have a new chart every week with some different information and data in it. We also have tips and tricks blogs, Build Your CQ, and anytime you've got a question, we've got a very strong support site available to you You can go to the Mekko Graphics ribbon in PowerPoint, and you can do help, ask an expert. That'll send us an email. If you find a bug or something you think is a bug, you can always email our support team by clicking on this button. And you've got my email address here. You can always reach out to me in an email and ask me a question as well. So that's my my quick tour of Marimekko charts. I hope that was useful. I hope you learned one or two tips and tricks. I hope our team has answered any questions that you had during the webinar, and I am available. I'll stick around for the next few minutes to see if more questions come in. I'm happy to answer them. Well, thank you so much for using our software and for attending our webinar. And I wish you all a good day. And like I said, I will stick around and answer any questions. You can either use the little questions tab in Mekko Graphics in GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, and we can work from there to answer them. Great. Thanks so much.